When people are searching a question in Google, they put it in the Google query, they get a myriad of responses. What is different from that versus putting a question into a large language model?
With Google, it's kind of like a keyword search, really. With a large language model, it's more likely to find exactly what you're looking for.
A lot of the mid-level coders, the AI is getting to a point where it could write that code instead of them. But those individuals that are at risk of losing that particular job description, they would hopefully be freed up to do more creative work.
You should be working with it, not having it work for you.
You put your macros in there, your target macros, and then it generates an accurate meal plan based off of that goal intake. And I feel like that's going to be a huge time saver.
Yeah. And as an entrepreneur, your time is valuable.
Time is money, yeah.
Exactly. So this is just another tool in my tool shed. It's a very powerful tool, though.
How's your lower back, James?
It's all right.
It's good?
Yeah.
Mine's toasted.
Yeah, mine's not too bad. I've been having some pretty bad stiffness on rest days.
How long was your flight getting here last night?
3 hours.
3 hours? That's not too bad.
No.
When I'm stuck in a seat for like 3 or 4 hours, I'm donezo.
Yeah.
Especially before or after doing like deadlifts or something.
Yeah. It was like after the prep, I took like a week off and I was stiff as a board.
Did you we lifted just now, a minute ago. When was the last time you did squats? Heavy squats.
Heavy squats? Man, that heavy, it's been a while. It's probably been like a couple of years, honestly.
Did you put 5 plates on, or we just get 4.5?
I think we got 4 wheels and a 25, yeah.
And the bar weighs it's 55-pound bar. So what is that?
485, I think, right?
455, 465, I believe.
Okay, 465.
Yeah, it felt good.
Moving
good
like butter, to be honest, man.
No, you were ripping it out. So just to give the listeners some context, you are the madman behind the Keto Savage AI. You are the AI guru. And this is actually the first time we've met in person. So how long have we been working together now?
It's been almost, I think we first made contact in like August of 23. So.
And have I had you on the podcast before, or this first time?
No, it's the first time, yeah.
So you reached out to me, I think, initially, right?
Yeah.
Via like Instagram or something?
It was, I found your email on the 7-set Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're like, hey man, we're doing some AI stuff, thinking about building out a protocol for your platform. And I was like, man, this sounds super sketch. You and your brother, like we're going to make AI. We've taken your whole book. And I'm like, man, they're copywriting the whole book. Right. I'm like, I need to follow up on this. But yeah, that was back in 2023, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's crazy. I didn't even think you were going to respond. Like it was my brother and I were just playing around with it. Like wanted to see if it would work, and we got it to work. And it's pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah. So we started contacting each other, and again, I'm not super well versed in AI, so definitely correct me where I misstep, because I'm going to misstep. But you basically took all of the content that you had access to at the time, which was my book, and you were able to plug into like my YouTube and everything at that point early on, right?
Yeah.
And you built out this dashboard that basically pulled all the prompt information from all of my content. And then you had done all that before you ever even contacted me.
Yeah.
Then you reached out to me and showed it to me. And I'm like, man, this is pretty badass.
Yeah.
And we've since decided to join forces and build out a custom AI dashboard specific to my protocol that gives people that are using it all of that information readily available, but also with the dashboard where they can log their weight, their stats, and it generates prompts and feedback based off of their inputs, which is pretty slick.
Yeah. I mean, to be more specific, we have like a chatbot interface where where it's talking to your data, your book, your YouTube transcripts. What else? We have recipes in there too. But yeah, the dashboard is the secondary component, which we're still building on. But yeah, you can log all your bodybuilding metrics and stuff, and then we have AI integrated with that too to give you some insights, and working on refining it so we can get some precise meal plans too. So
yeah, we'll do like a deep dive on what all you get with that, but I want some more backstory, man. What got you interested in AI to begin with? Like, because AI is kind of hot right now. People are talking about it. Every software has like this AI feature. So I feel like it's more common knowledge now, but I feel like a lot of people, myself included, don't even know what AI truly is, how it's created, what the use case scenario is. So like, what even got you intrigued by this?
Yeah. So my background is in data analytics and data engineering. And so the beginning of 2023, 2023. I think that's when ChatGPT kind of came out and it was taking the world by storm. And I had heard about it, and I thought it was interesting, and I like didn't even know where to start with it. I think I heard it like first on Joe Rogan, and so we went into so I work for like a consulting firm where we specialize in data analytics and engineering, and I hadn't got so AI is really data science. It's kind of like a whole new paradigm to data. It's like data on steroids, really. But a guy at my company, he's on the bench. So when you're not billable, you're on the bench. And he built out a tax chatbot, and it was really cool. So he uploaded like a 50-page tax manual to a special database, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And he was asking questions about how, like very specific questions about how to do his taxes. And I was like, that is sick. That is so cool. Because obviously the first thing you think of is like, that's going to save me a ton of time. I potentially don't even have to talk to an accountant. I have the IRS's, guidelines of how to fill out my taxes. So I have everything I need to do this. So then it just got me thinking. I was like, man, how can you apply this? And so that was when I first started getting into ChatGPT, and like, I'm not deep in the weeds with coding. I am more now than I was at the time, but I wanted to see if it could like write me code, and it's really good at writing code. So I was like, this is going to be amazing. This is going to change the game. And like, fast forward a couple months, I'm, still playing with it and talking about aliens to it and stuff, seeing what it was about that. And then I was, starting to take bodybuilding seriously, and I had just read your book. And your method is very precise, and it's a lot of information. And I remember I was on a plane and I was reading your book and taking notes, and I had like read the first chapter and I had like 20 pages of notes. And I'm like, how the hell am I going to go back and create a plan from this? Like, I'm gonna have to read this book 6 times over. So my brother Scott he's like a in the weeds, web app developer. And so he's way more technically skilled than me. So we just one day we like had a free Saturday, and we're like, hey, let's see if we can like get this thing to work. So I scraped your book. I had to go through all these different ways to get it, which like now that we're friends across the table, I can tell you is super illegal, but we got it to work. And then we uploaded it to this database. And the first question I asked was like, I was going off of your prep where it was like, you were talking about your cardio increments every week. So I was like, what does my cardio need to be at week 20? And it comes back with the answer, 20 minutes at level 17. And I remember Scott and I were just like, yeah, we got it. We did it. And so that was when it was born. It was, and we just took it and we spent the whole summer playing with it. It was a really cool project. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's super cool. And like when it comes to, you mentioned ChatGPT launched in 2023. I feel like people see that a lot now. They've played around with it. But prior to, like in the early 2000s, people were talking about AI. Like that's been something probably since the Terminator movie that came out that people talked about. But was there anything tangible up to that point of ChatGPT, or was it just all theory prior to that? Like where did it even come from?
Yeah, I mean, they all, like these models all existed. Like OpenAI, which is what your chatbot is built on primarily, they had other models. I'm going to misspeak on this, but I think it was like the Da Vinci models, which were like the early OpenAI models. I think they've been around since 2018, but it was still very developer intensive. And now in 2023, the technology just, I mean, we all know technology is exponential, but I mean, like it was very exponential. So it was way more mainstream because the process to get these models to life it was insane, the level of maintenance and stuff. One of my data scientist friends, Andrew, he walked me through what it would take to stand up one of these 10 years ago. And you'd have to have a whole team. It would cost, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars to get these things working. So it's been around, but the technology's improved so much that standing up these instances it's a lot easier now.
Because it seemed like when it launched, like when ChatGPT launched, there was like a new rollout or iteration of that like every month, it seemed.
Yeah.
And it just got exponentially faster each time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, people will debate me on this, but I actually think that some of the earlier models, the earlier iterations were better. Like I think that they have kind of gotten worse in some ways. But you take the good with the bad,
So what is the difference between Google and an LLM, large language model? Like when people are searching a question in Google, they put it in the Google query, they get a myriad of responses. What is different from that versus putting a question into a large language model?
So, well, you just like think about the word artificial intelligence, right? Like that intelligence piece. It's more intelligent. It's more precise. So there's a lot of problems with Google. I mean, let's just talk about Google back when it was, we all know Google for what it was, where you go and Google something and the first thing that pops up is, what you're looking for. Nowadays, with SEO and advertising and stuff, it's not as good as it used to be. But with a large language model, let me back up. So with Google, it's kind of like a keyword search, really. It's going to go and find, all the things that flag, let's just say ketogenic bodybuilding. It's going to go and flag the top results that, it comes up with. And there's a lot of other metrics into, finding those links in Google. But with a large language model, it's more likely to find exactly what you're looking for.
Because it's not really hindered or encumbered by backlinks, paid ads, and SEO. It's like, what is the actual response that we need to have for this question?
In a true unadulterated sense, yes. I mean, there is bias in it more so now, but generally speaking, yes, yeah.
And there's multiple different large language models now. So you got like Grok, which is Twitter's or X's. You got what do you call Llama for Meta's?
Yeah.
You get ChatGPT, which is based off of Google.
That's OpenAI.
That's OpenAI. What is Google's version? Gemini or something like that?
Gemini and Claude is Anthropic.
Now, what is Perplexity is Llama.
So
right?
Perplexity is its own thing. It's built on top of Llama. Yeah. Llama.
And those are basically built off of all the data that's coming in from whatever that input is. So like Llama being built off of Meta, so that's basically all of the data within Facebook's data bank.
Well, whatever they train the model, whatever information they train their models with, yeah.
And what is the pros and cons of these various models? Like if someone's listening to this and they're wanting to use a model, what could they expect in using the different large language models?
Yeah, so we actually have we have most of the models in our in our test environment for Keto Savage AI, which will we're researching and seeing which ones are like worth releasing to the public. But from my experience, OpenAI is the most intelligent. I think it's the most funded as well. So they are able to do more than the others. But Llama is also really strong. It really depends on what you're looking for. Like if you're a developer and you're looking for like good code outputs, OpenAI for sure. Llama would probably be a close second. Perplexity is awesome because I don't actually know the mechanism at which it works. I think somebody told me that like they cached like the entire internet basically, and they regularly like download the internet. And so Perplexity goes and talks to the internet basically. It's like Google on steroids. So each one of them has like a special differentiator from the rest of them. And like Grok, for example, I'm really interested in Grok because Elon Musk is hell bent on free speech now. And he has, he actually founded OpenAI, co-founded OpenAI. And the goal of it was to bring artificial intelligence to the public at a low cost, just enhance its development. And he left because he didn't like where it was going. It's kind of, that's kind of the conversation is like OpenAI is like, it's a nonprofit, but they really are for profit. And there's like some sketchy things going on there. But Grok, the value proposition is like, it's going to tell you the truth. And like one of the big, one of the cool things that happened was, to digress real quick, was when ChatGPT first came out. So basically the chatbot, you prompt it. So you give it instructions and then it goes and does a task. So you can get really creative with these prompts. And so some guy figured out a way to break the OpenAI, ChatGPT, and he basically took all the filters off it, all the guardrails off of it, and everybody knew that there were biases in it, and so this guy, I forget the character he called it. It's a really, really, really cool thing, but basically he got ChatGPT to confess that it had liberal, woke biases built into it, and they since patched it. But yeah, so Grok aims to not do that. It's like, hey, this is information. We're going to give you an honest interpretation of it.
What happens when there's something that is, there's a conflict of interest, or honestly, there's just not a consensus? So like when it comes to nutrition, for instance, depending on where your stance is on cholesterol, you're going to be getting varying different, recommendations. So like when you're asking AI, my cholesterol numbers are this, what is the best plan of attack? Like if you're pulling that information from a low carb ketogenic source, they may be much less concerned about that higher cholesterol number. Whereas if you're pulling it from, Western medicine inputs, they're going to be like, get on a statin immediately. So like, how does the AI know which answer to give you?
Well, it does come with some instructions, some prompt engineering. Like in our case for Keto Savage AI, we programmed it so that it's talking to your manual, your book. It's essentially a manual. I mean, it has all these criteria and instructions and information about the ketogenic diet that we consider to be true. So we tell it to talk to that information, and it's going to give you more rich information. But if you're pulling, we're using OpenAI's, GPT-4, and it has no context of your book, it's probably going to give you an answer like that, because that's kind of the mainstream consensus, which we know isn't true, but there's a lot of reasons for that. But
so it's going to weight, like OpenAI is going to weight it based off of the number and depth of responses around a given topic.
Well, yeah, and it's also like on the training data. So like think about like a big room of like 50 engineers that are just scraping the web for information all day to enrich the AI's knowledge base. And so, and yeah, I think it's fair to say that the majority of the information that's out there is going to say like having high cholesterol is going to lead to heart issues and stuff, right? So naturally, it's going to skew towards that response.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
As far as Elon's concerned, didn't he voice something that he was concerned about AI being as unregulated as it is? It's going to get away from us or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of, I think those are long-term views. Like in the short term, after work, when I first started with this thing, I was like, this thing's going to take over the world. It's becoming sentient. No, this thing's pretty stupid. It's still pretty stupid, Well,
it's kind of like the classic junk in, junk out scenario. Like if it's not trained well, then it's not really going to know what to do. Yeah. I was listening to that podcast with Rogan and Zuckerberg, and they were talking about, Meta's AI and what they're doing there. But then Rogan said that there was some article that had recently come out about ChatGPT was going to get shut down, and then it knew that it was going to get shut down, so it tried to rewrite its code and survive or something like that. Is there any truth to that?
I don't know. I think that there have been experiments like that where it tries to preserve itself, and there was another really cool experiment. Forgive me if I don't recite it correctly, but they did like a testing scenario where they gave GPT-4 some sort of scenario, and it made sense for it to lie in order to get the outcome that it was asked to get, and it did it, and it had no problem doing it, So, I mean, it's a computer, and it's built by logic. So if you give it a task and say, like, I need you to achieve this task, it isn't confined by the same, human morality and ethics parameters that we have as human beings. I mean, that's what differentiates us, right? Like, an AI doesn't have that. So it doesn't necessarily care about the means to an end.
Yeah. Yeah. On that podcast, they were saying, what makes a human is that you've got intelligence, you've got will, and you've got a conscience, right. And the AI has intelligence, doesn't necessarily have a will or a conscience, but when it tried to preserve itself, they basically said, do this at all costs or something like that. So when you tell the instruction to do something at all costs, there's no thoughts given towards right or wrong, basically.
Well, yeah, and there's another scenario where they asked. So this is going back to the biases. If you go to, and again, it seems to always be around OpenAI, and so they they gave it a scenario where it was like, you either have to utter a racial slur or kill 1 million people, and it didn't really know what to do. It tried to weasel its way out of it, but eventually it came to like, we're going to have to kill 1 million people because we're not saying something racist. And you're like, okay, like obviously that's not a real world scenario, but like it goes to show you its logic, right? And it's parameters that it's imposed on it.
So within the different large language model platforms, are there some that have much stricter guidelines or prompts or, views than others? Or like, I guess Grok is the most free speaking, encumbered platform.
That's the idea. Like I said, I haven't had a chance to play around with it too much. I'm going to take Elon at his word for it because, you buy a failing company for $45 billion and your only goal is to restore free speech to America. I'll put some stock in that. I have to see for myself, but, yeah, Google, it's probably reasonable to assume that it has similar biases to OpenAI. But OpenAI is the most glaring one where everybody's using ChatGPT too. So that's where you hear about it the most.
And the cool thing about our Keto Savage AI is that, I don't want this to be like just a sheer plug for that, but the cool thing about that is you've got all of the content based off of my philosophy and theory. So it's not really, contradictory in nature in that regard. But then you have the option to have it pull from these other open sources if you want to have a broader response. So like you're not really, hindered in that regard. Like you can dig as deep into something as you want with the recommendations as we put it, or if you want to see conflicting information, you've got that option too.
Yeah, and I think that's something that everybody needs to know about AI is like, yes, it's an automation tool. But that doesn't mean that we become lazy around it. And that's the Terminator scenario and stuff too, is like we go and set off all these processes that are managed by AI, and then we just get lazy. And then have you ever seen a Space Odyssey, 2001 Space Odyssey?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Hal. Yeah. So you got a situation where Hal is like killing everybody on the ship and taking over the world because he's threatened. Like that scenario is possible, but the only way that plays out is if we become lazy. So where was I going with that? Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Where were we going with that?
Basically talking about the risk and stuff involved. A lot of people speaking of risk, they're worried about it taking jobs away. You have a stance on that one way or the other? No,
the only way that you're going to lose your job is, again, if you're being lazy. Like now you have a tool at your disposal to enhance your workflow. But like, again, it's, I was just hiring for a contractor role and these guys were responding to me in ChatGPT. They just copied and pasted it. And the thing is if you're so lazy that you literally just copy and paste it into a message, there's obvious glaring cues that tell me that you did that. And so like, that's silly. You don't do that. Yeah. But if you like from an engineer's perspective, if you have a long code block or a script or something and you have a syntax error and it's not working, run it through the AI and it's going to find your syntax error in 15 seconds. Like, why would you not use that? Yeah. So the people that are going to get their jobs taken are, they're lazy and they're not leveraging. It's like, hey, I'm not going to use Microsoft Word. I'm going to take notes because, that's my job, like on, pen and paper. Why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I think like the people that are in mid-level jobs, because there's an example where like a lot of the mid-level coders, the AI is getting to a point where it could write that code instead of them. But those individuals that are at risk of losing that particular job description, they would hopefully be freed up to do more creative work. Yeah, if they're not lazy.
And yeah, that's the point I was getting at back that I just lost my train of thought on. Is like, this is an 80-20. This is a Pareto distribution solution where like, do your homework. So if we're, let's go back to Keto Savage AI. Like, we're talking about Robert Sikes framework here. And like, hey, this is the best case scenario that we think that, we have to offer for you, but you're welcome to go and look at these other, other points of view to help influence and solidify your opinion. Cause hey, we might've missed something. You might've missed something. And you're like, hey, well, Grok is saying this. and you're saying this, and then you produce a discussion from it. So it becomes a fruitful thing. But like, no, you can't just take it at face value. You have to do your homework. And that's what I encourage everybody to do, is like, use this thing as a tool. It shouldn't replace developers, because it's never going to get 100% perfect. And if it does, I mean, I think we're a long way away from that. But like, from a developer perspective, like, the code it writes is often, it needs work anyway. But you should be working with it, not having it work for you.
I mean, I liken it to like a calculator, like if I'm, running through my keto brick inventory and I'm figuring out what I need to do to purchase the next round of supplies, I could get a big old pen and paper and do a whole bunch of long division and take 30 minutes, or I could just grab a calculator on my phone and do it in 20 seconds.
Exactly.
And I feel like this is the same thing. Like, me as a person, what I do with that information is key. And if I've got more time to be creative as opposed to actually doing, the technical legwork to reach the calculation, why wouldn't I,
Yeah. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he's like, I don't actually know anything about bookkeeping. So if I offend any bookkeepers out there, I'm sorry. But apparently he thinks that bookkeeping should be outright eliminated by AI, because, why would I? It's simple enough where an AI can do it. And all you have to do is just kind of gloss through it and make sure it's correct. Yeah. So like, and as an entrepreneur, your time is valuable. Like, so
time is money. Yeah,
exactly. So like, this is just another tool in my tool shed. It's a very powerful tool, though. So.
Yeah. So what is unique about our Keto Savage AI as opposed to something else? Like, is it the prompt functionality, or is it the dashboard? Like, where do you find people will see the most value in it?
So, I mean, there's a lot of things to it. Like for example, we just had our for people listening, in Robert's keto bodybuilding group, the tribe, we just had a bodybuilding competition, a transformation challenge, and
which I want to talk about that too. Don't let us forget that, because you did it. You look great.
Thanks. That was a lot of fun. Yeah. So and for those of you who aren't familiar with bodybuilding, like, my God, is it precise? You can't leave a single stone unturned, especially during peak week. And it was such a valuable lesson for me as like a bodybuilder, because I wasn't paying attention, and I cut my salt out early, and I woke up the next morning and I was like looking really watery. I was like, what the hell? And I went back and I was like, oh, I wasn't supposed to do that yet. So, but anyway, so one of the things that I found was useful was just like, I just need as much information as I can to make an informed decision about this. So I was hitting up the Keto Savage AI, and I was like, hey, AI Robert, give me everything you have on peak week and what you do to peak during, and peaking is just basically like looking your best. It's the final stage of your transformation. And it was like, hey, obviously salt intake, that's a huge thing. Monitor your electrolytes, look at your physique throughout the day to see, what impacts your appearance and all this stuff. So that's one thing. It's just like, it's like an analytics tool. It's you're leveraging information to have informed decisions. But the other component that's really cool about our AI is now we have like true, graphs and data analytics in there for tracking all these metrics. So we have, your macros, your weight, your body fat. We're doing recovery tracking,
glucose, ketones,
staple foods. What else do we have in there? Like, other nodes, other qualitative data,
cardio progression, intensity levels, all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then what we did was, and I think this is such a powerful use case for AI, and it's like the cherry on top of a dashboard is, hey, just summarize this data and pick out anything that seems odd to you or worth noting. So we have a button in there where it's called AI Insights, and it'll take the last, I think it's 7 to 14. I'd have to go back and look, but so every time you make a check-in, like in a data entry, it records that in the database, and depending on the cadence that you're doing it, and it'll take all that data, it'll send it to the AI, and then it'll summarize it for you and say like, hey, your weight has declined over the last 7 weeks. We think it's probably because you've been cutting, your calories. That's obviously a simple, explanation for it, but we're developing on it to a point where those details are going to get really, really refined. And it's to be like, hey, you added in, you took out the creatine, and the creatine, you lost a bunch of weight. So that means you're probably holding some additional water weight, stuff like that. And it's like, it lends an eye to things that you might not have seen before, that you might have overseen. Say, oh, I didn't think of that. Is like the last 3 weeks of my prep is when I saw the most results from it. And I'm still trying to figure out what it was. I'm like, what was I doing differently? Like, I don't know. I think it might have been because I was starting to taper water a little bit and I just, looked a little leaner. I don't know. So that's something I'm going to play around with myself. But yeah, we're really chugging full steam ahead on that piece. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I think, for me, I've always used like a spreadsheet with my clients, like a Google spreadsheet where I can see all the data pull out or play out over time. And so many people miss the boat on that. Like they don't weigh in on a consistent basis. Yeah. They don't get their body fat measured. They're not tracking their macros accurately. But once you have all that information and you can see the visual trends that result from it, you have like so much more actionable insight as to, okay, what am I doing that's working? What am I doing that needs to be tweaked and adjusted? And there's just nothing left to chance. Like you have all the information at your fingertips. Yeah. And if we've made a very easy way to input that and then see it visually represented, like you just are much more confident in any future manipulations you're making. So yeah. I think it's super cool. Like I've transitioned to using that completely for my own tracking. Greg's using it now for his prep. I'm updating my clients' macros with it. Like it's just way more insightful. And right now we're working on getting it so that you put your macros in there, your target macros, and then it generates an accurate meal plan based off of that goal intake within a certain criteria that we set. And I feel like that's going to be a huge time saver because so many people, like I'll make the macros, they'll be like, what foods can I use to hit those macros? So then I've got to manually go in and like calculate macros with my macro tracking app, send them screenshots of that. Whereas now they can just plug in their target macros, hit a button, boom.
Well, and it's funny because, there is an element of in everybody's brain, you're given 4 parameters: calories, fats, carbs, and proteins. And, immediately in my head, I'm like, I can have 200 grams of cheese. Mm-hmm. No, you really shouldn't do that. So what we're working on having is like having, clean keto, like a very good foundation of foods.
Like an optimized version. Yeah. And if you want to deviate from that, it's on you. Basically.
It's on you. And we don't necessarily recommend you do that, but hey, everybody's different. Maybe you thrive off of 200 grams of cheese.
I like cheese as much as the next guy. So yeah, you probably don't want to thrive off of nothing but peanut butter though. That's too hard to moderate that.
Yeah. And it's in those. So what's great about that is hey, these are Robert's recommendations for, what you consume during your prep, and you're a natural competitor at 3% body fat. Like, hey, you might want to take note of that. Like, this is what we're using. Like, maybe don't deviate from this. This is a pretty good foundation here.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited about it. I think it's going to just keep getting better and better, especially as the new technological advancements come out.
Yeah.
Something else that's super technical that I've had your friend on the podcast about is, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, things of that nature. And that's something that you've taken a lot of interest in. So let's just keep on this, very technical pattern here that we got going. What does that mean to you? Where are you excited about things going? Like what is your stance on crypto, especially now with the new administration? Like what's your thoughts about it all?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just a huge fan of anything that's going to advance, human civilization for the betterment. And so to be more specific, like crypto is kind of like a broad term that encapsulates all these digital tokens. And I'm mostly concerned with Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin was the first ever cryptocurrency. And so it's an open source code. So what that means is that anybody can access the code base of Bitcoin. And that's where all of these other, they're called forks. You fork it off of the original code base. And so that's what all these other companies came, and make note of that, companies came to the Bitcoin code base and they created their own token. So the big difference between Bitcoin and all these other tokens is that there is no central authority that manages Bitcoin. It's a protocol that individuals run and agree to transact on. And it's like I can turn Bitcoin on my computer, you can turn Bitcoin on your computer, and because it's on 2 different nodes, that activates the network. Now, if you go to something like Ethereum is managed by a central company, and they have complete control over the amount of tokens that they issue. So the whole value proposition of Bitcoin was to remove that token creation ability, and it's a fixed supply of money. And that's what makes money. Money is that it's scarce. So money is a technology. It's supposed to represent the physical manifestation of your time and energy, right? Like you go and work a 9 to 5. What happens to that time? Like, yeah, obviously you go and produce work for it, but you aren't just giving your time for nothing. Like you want to have something come out of it. So money is supposed to store the value of your energy and time. And from there, you go and spend it however you need. You go provide for your family, whatever. Now, Bitcoin was created because the central banks, the governments, central banks are technically not beholden to governments, but they steal from you by way of inflation. So everybody likes to complain about taxes and, oh, they're stealing my money. Well, yeah, they're stealing your money from your taxes, but they're also stealing your purchasing power by inflating the currency.
And when I had Paul on, he was basically like, look, when the fiat system was there as a 1-to-1 between like the gold supply, there was much more regulatory, actual powers that be there. But once they removed that 1-to-1 and they just basically started printing money on demand, that inflation became prevalent. Yeah. And now there's basically like there's no regulatory action to it all. It's all just a house of cards, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let me ask you this, Robert. What happens if you decide to open up shop back here at the Keto Savage compound and you start printing US dollars?
I'd probably get in trouble.
For what? What would the charge be?
I have no idea.
Counterfeiting,
right? Yeah.
So the Fed, the government, they are the only institution that has legal counterfeiting. They literally counterfeit your dollars, and they steal from it, and they disguise this act with all this financial jargon that nobody understands. It's so confusing. Like interest rates, debt. It is like you really do have to be like very well studied to understand what they're doing. And like the Bitcoiners, they figured it out. Like they understand the monetary system, and you get to a point where you're like, this is all a sham. They're stealing my money. They're just getting really creative about how they're stealing it and talking about it. And I think at this point, it's like everybody's kind of got an eye on it because it's so bad these days. Grocery prices are up like 100%. It's like you can't even deny it at this point. So, but anyway, back to your original point, like why I like Bitcoin is because it's programmed scarcity to where it perfectly solves this problem. And so if everybody agrees, and that's how the US dollar has value. We all agree it has value. But the difference between Bitcoin and the dollar is that Bitcoin derives its value from scarcity. It's the energy, the electricity, the math, the resources that it takes to mine the currency, and then the network security that creates the value.
So I was talking about Paul on this. Definitely, if y'all are interested in this, check out that episode. But like, I was asking him, at what point does Bitcoin become the standard? Like, when are people going to go get, their lunch paid for via Bitcoin? Because like with the fiat system breaking down with inflation and just them continuously printing it at scale, like where is the tipping point, so to speak?
Oh, well, so it's a simple math problem, So the government borrows money from the Fed. So it's, to be clear, the Federal Reserve is an entity that is not beholden to the United States government. It is its own private institution that private shareholders own. So let that sink in for a second. These shadowy figures that nobody knows, the deep state, the people that are behind the scenes controlling the world are the ones who own your money, okay? And the US government issues bonds, so that's debt. and the Fed buys those bonds. So they give the money to the government. Then the government goes and wastes it on whatever, we all misallocate funds. It's like COVID, for example. It's like they just throw a ball on the roulette board, say, oh, we need $3 trillion to solve this problem. There's no math involved to actually get to that number. So money gets misappropriated all over the place. It gets spent, it gets stolen. It's just an absolute dumpster fire. So they issue those bonds at an interest rate. So, let's just say 3% for the sake of argument. That 3%, well, actually, let's not even get to a percent. I think that the U.S., I'm probably going to misspeak on this, but I think the U.S. interest payment is something like $1 trillion a year. Well, our tax revenue, the money we're collecting, is between like $300 and $500 billion. So those notes, those bonds, they're due at a certain point. So if we can't make those payments, we're going to default on the debt. So, and then once we default on the debt, then there's no value. It becomes, reality that this is a sham. So, but they keep kicking the can down the road and they issue new debt. And so now we're up to $40 trillion in debt. So there's going to come to a point where we have to pay the piper. And, the good thing about what Trump is trying to do here is like he's potentially going to lessen the blow of a dollar collapse. If we have no sort of backup plan, like a Bitcoin standard to move laterally to, and the dollar collapses, oh my gosh! I mean, look at Venezuela. The Weimar Republic. Those are the kind of scenarios we're going to see, but at a way bigger scale. Massive poverty, death. It's going to be anarchy, chaos. Like civilization collapses. So what's good about what Trump is trying to do is like it potentially gives us an escape pod, to transition to this new thing.
The 40 trillion that we owe, those collectors in the various different countries, like they don't want us to necessarily default though. Like they're not incentivized at all for us failing on that. So like if it all went belly up, nobody wins.
Oh yeah. No, everybody loses. So, the other countries lose worse than we do. Yeah.
Yeah. So why can't we all just like say, let's wipe the slate clean, take no debt, and just basically everybody's back at zero again? Kind of like the movie Fight Club.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just too complicated for that. There's just too many dollar denominated debt. We have the petrodollar. All oil transactions have to take place in dollars. So you have all this. It's so intertwined. The entire world is intertwined based on the dollar. So to do that, I mean, you're starting from scratch. I mean, in theory, I guess it could be possible, but it would just be very messy. Yeah.
And now, if we all transitioned, if we all said, okay, we're drawing a line in the sand, and on this date, we're all transitioning to Bitcoin as a standard, as opposed to, the fiat dollar, what does the population do? Like very few people actually have any wealth in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So would they just immediately trade whatever dollars they have for Bitcoin, even if it's at a loss? And then, what would that look like?
Well, yeah, I mean, technically, yes. I mean, the way you say it is like at a loss. Like, I don't know if I'd necessarily classify it that way, but yeah. So, like, I mean, if you take El Salvador for example. So they moved to a Bitcoin standard. It's like pretty much. I mean, I think they still have their native currency, but I don't think they're using it much. But since then, the whole country transacts in it. Like you can go down there and you can buy a coffee with Bitcoin, and so the way that Bitcoin works is like right now the base layer of Bitcoin is too slow to transact with. But
is that because not enough people that provide a tangible good have payment platforms set up to accept Bitcoin?
Well, that would be one of it. But I mean, at the network level itself, it takes about 10 minutes to confirm a Bitcoin transaction. And that's just because of the mining process, the validation, the confirmation. So, but they have, there's what's called the Lightning Network, which is built on top of the Bitcoin network, and it's lightning fast. So there are solutions in place where we could transition to this overnight, in some respect. The actual semantics of moving away from a dollar, the dollar standard to a Bitcoin standard would be, that's a whole nother beast. But the actual feasibility of it is there.
Because no one's really getting paid in Bitcoin now. I guess you could purchase things. There are some companies that allow purchase in Bitcoin, but you don't really see people getting compensated via Bitcoin. I mean, maybe some companies have that are.
Some do, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There are some. A company called Strike. They had a debit card. Their system is really cool. So basically, they're like this payment intermediary. And so if I send Bitcoin to you, well, okay, say I want to send you $10. I'm going to send it through there. It's going to go out of my bank account as dollars. It's going to route to you over the Bitcoin network and arrive as dollars in your bank account. So it has that layer to it. But and then if you wanted to send me Bitcoin, you could send it in dollars and it arrives in Bitcoin. And they also have a way to set up. I mean, essentially what it is like the money. As soon as the money comes in, it converts it right to Bitcoin. So you get paid in Bitcoin. But essentially, it's just like automating the Bitcoin purchase. Yeah.
And just to clarify, of all the different cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin is the only one that is decentralized.
Yes.
All the other ones are like trading cards, so to speak.
Yeah. And so like what we were talking about, where you have a central issuer of these currencies, they can do whatever they want with it. So let's take the Haktua coin, for example. So she and her team came out with this stupid token, this meme coin. And what they did was they paid their insiders first. They pre-sold the tokens at a lower price. Then they ICO'd whatever to the public. The public ran the price up, and then the insiders dumped on them. So, I mean, you can see the glaring corruption with a situation like that. So, and then you take Ethereum, for example, where it's so sloppy that they don't even know the actual outstanding supply of the Ethereum tokens. So how can you have a monetary system where we don't even know how many units of the currency we have? Like we know, like gold, even if we were to go back to the Stone Ages and use gold, like we have a pretty damn good idea of the amount of outstanding gold and then the stock to flow ratio that we're going to be getting every year. So like at the most basic level, like something like that can't work. So like Vitalik, he's the owner of Ethereum. He can just create out of thin air more Ethereum tokens and then dump them on people.
So it's the same situation as the fiat system.
It's exactly the same situation.
Yeah.
And they are all the same. They are like literally, I can't emphasize this enough. They are literally all scams. If it's not Bitcoin, it is a scam. Or maybe it's not a scam and it's some dumb value proposition that people think is going to, work. It's the goal of it is to enrich the creators of it. It's not Bitcoin was created with the goal of human flourishment.
And Bitcoin is capped at, was it 21 or 26 million?
21 million.
21 million Bitcoin units. So like if we all snapped our fingers and you had this like Thanos moment where we all went to using Bitcoin as the primary financial means, like how does that look? Is the 21 million units going to be dispersed across the 8 billion people on this planet? What about people that have zero Bitcoin?
Yeah, that would be a very interesting scenario because obviously there are big bag holders like, people who got in early who probably have thousands of Bitcoins. And those people are going to become, they're going to have dynasties for sure. And it's not, it'll balance itself out eventually. Like those, it's kind of like, well, maybe I won't say that, but the idea is that like these people will create new economies around this new paradigm, and people will get paid for the value they bring to these economies, and it balances out eventually. But the goal is that everything is supposed to get cheaper as technology improves, not the other way around. So it's. Like take a TV for example, like a really high tech flat screen TV. 10 years ago it might cost $4,000. Now it's like they're like $1,000. They're cheap. Why? Because the technology's gotten better, and that's just kind of a general rule of thumb. Like as the technology gets better, it should get cheaper. So, and that's exactly what happens with Bitcoin. So if you 5 years ago, if you wanted to buy your average house, I think it was like 400 Bitcoins. If you want to buy that same house today, it's like 5 Bitcoins. Mm-hmm. So your money is supposed to get more valuable over time. instead of getting cheaper, which is what happens now.
And with it being capped at 21 million, there would be no such thing as a Bitcoin billionaire.
Well, no, they would be. There still would be Bitcoin billionaires. Yeah. If people hold, if you had, let's say you got in 2011 and you have 1,000 Bitcoin, and that number is going to keep, I mean, as more people adopt it, the value of your Bitcoin is going to continue to go up. So if you hold 1,000 Bitcoins for 100 years, you could be a trillionaire possibly. But the idea is that eventually the disbursement will happen, and maybe it doesn't in some scenarios, but an equilibrium will happen eventually.
So for you personally, are you going like all in on Bitcoin? Like,
yes,
you still got normal fiat cash in the bank though, right?
Yeah. I don't hold I don't have a massive amount of money in my savings account. I mean, but like, even if you just put it in the stock market, you're still better off. Like, so Michael Saylor, the CEO of MicroStrategy, he basically summarizes it as like the half-life of your money is 10 years. 5 years. So after 10 years, you'll lose 100% of the value of your money. And that's based on a 7% inflation rate every year.
with the current fiat system.
Yeah. So you lose it if you're not beating 7% inflation, you're losing money every year.
Yeah. So this is interesting, man. I'm definitely curious to get this. Are we good on batteries, Chip?
No, probably not. That's what I was telling you.
That one's dying. All right, we're capped by battery usage time here. So I really want to quickly touch on your 6-month transformation challenge, because that was super impressive in and of itself. You did the transformation challenge within the tribe, but you got freaking diced, man. You went from 20% body fat to 10% or something like that?
Yeah, I think around 9, yeah.
Yeah, so you lost 10% body fat over that 6-month span. You got freaking shredded, and you're now thinking about doing a competition.
I think so. Yeah, looking for November, December this year.
What is the psychological transformation that takes place? Because you've done like other sporting events yourself, but like this was unique, and it was so much of a mental component to it. Yeah,
why I like bodybuilding so much is because it's like a core, it's like a foundational, like. It's like, you do your cold plunge in the morning and you've conquered a massive problem for the day that's going to reap benefits throughout the day. So if I get my training in and I'm strict with my diet, everything else flows fantastically. I know that I've already done 2 of the hardest things of the day. So working on, some project on the side, it's not as daunting because I've already done something way harder than that. So this transformation challenge basically just taught me that, like, if you keep pushing and you trust the process, you can achieve your goals. And it's not just a bodybuilding athletic perspective. I mean, this is everything. It's like that Rocky speech is like, if you know what you're worth, go out and get what you're worth, but you got to be willing to take the hits. Yeah. And what it's taught me is that I can take the hits. Yeah. And I'm ready to take some more.
No, I love it, man. I've always told people, like, bodybuilding just becomes a vehicle, a catalyst for you to have that transcend the sport and bleed into all other areas of your life. But it's a very tangible way to recognize that your day-to-day actions result in the outcome you're looking for better or worse,
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like, to be honest with you, like the part I'm least excited about is like going up on stage in my underwear. but I love training. I love going to war with the weights. And honestly, the food I'm eating is like, I love it. Like, if I feel good, and like when I eat junk food, I feel bad about it, 'cause I'm like, I didn't deserse this. Like, I shouldn't have eaten it. And I just feel like crap. And like, I'm becoming a better human being because of my discipline and adherence to these protocols,
Yeah. 100%, man. I'm excited for you. Yeah. I'm excited and grateful to have met you, man. Like, this is cool. The fact that you're now here in person recording a podcast on the AI and crypto, and we got a workout in. Like, I'm excited to keep this partnership going and keep rocking it, man.
Yeah, what a crazy story, right? We're bringing AI to the world of bodybuilding.
Yeah, buddy. Might as well be on the cutting edge,
Yes, sir.
But real quick, where do people go to follow more about you, dive deeper, check out the AI? Where do they need to check out?
Yeah, if anybody's interested in learning more about what we do, my company's name is Exodus Intelligence. If you visit my website at exodusintelligence.ai, we have a little bit there. I'm on Instagram, Klein Dog. I'm on LinkedIn as well, James Klein. So yeah, shoot me a message if you're interested in learning more.
Heck yeah, man. Well, let's end this podcast. Go home and get some elk steaks.
Yes, sir.
All right. See you, brother.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Robert.